I am from Scotland. I grew up in Aberdeenshire in the northeast of Scotland, and then I moved to Edinburgh to do my undergraduate degree in psychology at Heriot-Watt University. And then I realised that I really liked research, so I decided to do a master's in child development, which I also did in Scotland at the University of Stirling, which is not too far away from Edinburgh. And then after that 1-year master's, I decided to apply to do PhD, which I also did in Scotland at the University of Stirling. And that was in social learning and cultural evolution, with Professor Christine Caldwell as my supervisor. So I completed my PhD after just over 3 years and applied to do a postdoctoral research fellowship. And I also did that at the University of Stirling in the philosophy department. So after 3.5 years working on that interdisciplinary project, I then moved to the University of Toronto, Mississauga, just last year in 2024. So I did an undergraduate degree in psychology at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh, and I realised that in my 4th year I really enjoyed doing developmental research. So for my undergraduate dissertation or thesis, I did research on prosocial behaviour, and for that I went into several schools and did research with, I think it was 5 to 8-year-old children, and that kind of gave me a good idea about how research works in those kinds of environments. So then when I chose to do a master's, it was in child development that I was most interested. So in doing that master's, I learned a lot more about like the research process and the kind of different methods that you can use, which gave me an insight into research being a potential job, which I hadn't really considered before. And I discovered that a PhD was something that you could do and learn to do research yourself and answering different questions that I was interested in. So my PhD, I was working in an interdisciplinary project, and it was a very large European Research Council grant. What we were doing in that is looking at the development of human cumulative culture, and specifically I was interested in what it is about social learning in children that allows humans to develop cumulative culture that animals might not have. So different kinds of learning mechanisms that children have available to them that we maybe don't find in primates. And from that I then became involved as a postdoctoral researcher in another interdisciplinary project, kind of at the intersection between philosophy, developmental psychology and comparative cognition. So we were doing a research project looking at the development of rational belief revision. This project involved testing young children and also dogs and pigs in similar kinds of paradigms so that we could look at how their reflective belief revision or whether they have the capacity for reflective belief revision, which kind of gave me the kind of insight into what I'm kind of starting to do now, which is linking more back to the social learning aspect of my PhD and using the belief revision aspects of my first postdoc. So I applied to work in the child lab, which was, I guess, about a year ago now. Really liked the idea of working back with slightly older children, having worked with 2-year-olds most recently. So now I'm working on the intellectual humility or developing intellectual humility project with Dr. Samuel Rumford in the child lab, alongside lots of other researchers from other institutions across North America and Europe. So slightly different to what I've been doing most recently, but it's nice that I'm able to combine PhD research and also my postdoctoral research from before as well, so looking at belief revision in relation to intellectual humility. So I became interested in psychology because I really like people watching. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't know anyone who had done like a master's or a PhD. So when I started my first training in my undergraduate degree, I was really just interested in people, and I thought potentially I would go into educational psychology or I guess maybe teaching at some point, because I didn't know that research was something that you could do as a career. So that kind of was where I came from. I've always been interested in working with kids as well, so it's nice that I'm able to use like the developmental side of the research in order to keep kind of that aspect of my interests going. I guess I decided like to specialise in learning and development through like the different people that I've met. So I guess my PhD supervisor, Christine Caldwell at Stirling, she mostly works on social learning, she was also my master's supervisor as well, so that gave me a good grounding in like the different social learning strategies in both animals and young children, and also adults as well. And that gave me a good insight into what things I could study and how that could affect cultural evolution. And then I guess I've mostly been influenced by like different papers that I've read and different people that I've met at conferences and things that I hadn't even realised people were asking as questions in research. I then became interested in belief revision and how we can use different disciplines and different kind of techniques and research methods across different species and different ages and different modalities in order to answer kind of big questions. So I think it's still developing. I think my understanding of intellectual humility is still kind of improving. I guess like this is why we're studying it, I guess. There's so many different definitions of intellectual humility, and we just recently had a pre-conference related to the project where I think they said that there was like 40-something definitions of intellectual humility, and we all use slightly different ones, which is interesting in itself. I guess in terms of how it connects to like research, we've discussed in our lab meetings quite a lot about how being intellectually humble kind of makes us better scientists and allows us to ask questions and allows us to recognise when we are biased in the information that we have or the research that we've done, that we can see its limitations and recognise like when we need to kind of ask new questions or recognizing like the different limits that we have in terms of the knowledge that we already have. And I think the work that I've been doing so far is kind of trying to answer these big questions, but recognizing that we can't answer all of these immediately and kind of leaning on different members of our team in kind of a collective intellectual humility sense is also really beneficial, I think, for the research. So every day is a little bit different. I sometimes work in person at UTM, so I come in about 3 days a week, and those days tend to have meetings, both one-to-one meetings with members of the team, such as Dr. Wrongford, or we have reading groups where we read papers and discuss them and kind of relate them to our own research. Sometimes they're not relevant for our own research, but they're just really interesting to talk about. So there's not really a typical day, but if I'm not in meetings, then generally I'm kind of planning studies, developing kind of the research questions that we're working on, trying to work out the best way to test things, creating stimuli or working with research assistants to create stimuli, doing a lot of data analysis. I'm at the moment working on lots of projects that are all kind of at data analysis stage, so there's lots of data, making figures, trying to work out exactly what it means, and then trying to write that up into sensible kind of summaries so that we can then discuss as part of the research team like how to like explain what we're finding. But the days are very different, and I think I quite like that. I don't like sitting doing exactly the same thing every day. I like having the variety and being able to work from home a couple of days and go to seminars at the different campuses to hear other people talk about their research. Yeah, there's not one set day, but I think that's good. I think the hardest part of doing research is the length of time that it can take from the start of a project to the finished product of a paper, or at least getting the results. I mean, that's also exciting that you have like a lot of different parts of the process, but sometimes it can be frustrating that you have so long between having an idea and then being able to like implement it in terms of like creating the research project and running the study, and then by the time you get the data, it's months, perhaps even years later, and then you have to then write it up, and the review process can take a very long time. So that for me is the most frustrating thing sometimes, that it can be a long process, and sometimes multiple projects are overlapping at different stages of the process, which can be challenging to keep on top of. But it does allow us for lots of like new questions in the meantime while we're waiting for data to come in. I guess my proudest accomplishment is maybe like gaining the confidence in kind of what I'm doing. I know it's not really specific, but maybe like if you told me when I was a teenager that I would be willing to stand up in front of people and talk and like present about my research and speak to people that I don't know, I feel like I would have said there's absolutely no way. So I guess I'm quite proud that now, although it's not the easiest thing to do, I've come a long way and I'm happy enough to do it at conferences or talk in front of a class or teach, whereas I would not have done that when I was younger. And I didn't think I would ever do that. I feel like stepping outside of your comfort zone and maybe not always sticking to exactly the same research topics, being willing to kind of go interdisciplinary and speak to different disciplines and speak to different researchers who maybe don't do exactly what you do, because I feel like it opens up loads of new questions and lets you see different perspectives on your work and kind of opens up different avenues that you might not necessarily see, and whether that's in like research questions or methodologies or different careers that are not necessarily within academia, and it gives you the chance to see where your research could go, both in terms of like geographically, so like moving countries or speaking to people who are a completely different discipline from you. So like I've worked with philosophers and comparative psychologists and also developmental psychologists, and I think being able to step outside your research, like your own research zone, is pretty cool. I think doing good research, is my main goal. I don't really know for sure like where I'm going to be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. I would like to still be doing research in some form anyway, whether that's as a professor or a researcher in a different organisation, like outside of academia, I'm not totally sure, but I would like to keep like working on interesting questions and building skills in like data analysis and keeping good open science practices, like making it so that it's accessible to the public and being able to kind of translate the knowledge that we get as researchers back to the public. I think that's what is nice about what we do, is that we answer these big questions and then we gain lots of knowledge, but we need to be able to also like disseminate it. So even though I don't know exactly where I'm going to be, I would like to try and stay on that track of good research and good science.